It's May 25, 2016. I'm about to read DC Universe Rebirth number 1. It's November 22, 2017. I'm about to read the first issue of Doomsday Clock. It's December 18, 2019. I'm about to read the final issue of Doomsday Clock. Everything ends. What DC Rebirth started has finally come to an end, with Doomsday Clock number 12, written by Jeff Johns, art by Gary Frank, the coloring by Brad Anderson, the covers both A and B by Frank and Anderson. This review is going to be a bit different than usual. I'm going to be spoiling the entirety of issue number 12. Yes, I know, very comic story or comics explained of me, but I really do want to talk about everything that happened in this issue and then my thoughts on some of it. So if you haven't read Doomsday Clock number 12 yet, please come back to the video. But if you have read it or you really just don't care about spoilers, let's continue. The issue starts with Superman coming face to face with Dr. Manhattan. All alone, Superman is confronted by an alliance between Russia and Sokovia, and on the other side, Black Adam's own forces. All of them are there for Superman, and incredibly outnumbered, Supes defends himself and tries to save any civilians that are caught in the crossfire, pleading for Dr. Manhattan's help. Elsewhere, Reggie Long, the second Rorschach, is saved by Alfred and Batman, who encourage him to learn from Rorschach's journal and from Byron to change what he sees in the mask. And as the fated moment approaches, Dr. Manhattan reveals the truth about his hand in changing the DC Universe history and being indirectly responsible for killing Superman's parents. As he saw in his vision of the future, a red-eye, angered Superman launches a fist at Dr. Manhattan. But it is not Manhattan he strikes. Instead, he defends Dr. Manhattan from one of Russia's metas. The observant Superman sees that with every step Manhattan takes, he produces numerous photos. The first photo Manhattan took with Janie when he was just John Osterman. The world doesn't end at Dr. Manhattan's hands. Neither does his life at Superman's hands. The Man of Steel inspires him to make another choice, a third choice, and understanding what he means, Dr. Manhattan raises his hands, declaring that everything ends as a bright blue light envelops all as everything fades into darkness. Light returns as Baby Kal-El's rocket crash lands on Earth. Fast forward to July 16th, 1940. Dr. Manhattan moves the Green Lantern out of Alan Scott's reach, leading to his death. Jonathan Kent tells a young Clark that people would be scared of his powers. July 16th, 1940. Dr. Manhattan moves the Green Lantern back. Jonathan Kent recalls stories of the Justice Society of America to a young Clark, telling him that the world is ready for another superhero if Clark is ready to show them what he's got. Clark becomes Superboy, the JSA exists once again, and so does the Legion of Superheroes. And in present day, as time begins to catch up and the metaverse reforms, Superman continues to barely survive the onslaught of various superhumans, metahumans, and superpowered figures. But he is no longer alone as the JSA and the Legion both return to save the Man of Tomorrow. Dr. Manhattan is inspired as he re-watches the history of the DC Universe and its potential future, stating that no matter what happens and the changes that are made, Superman will always remain a constant beacon of hope. Having played his part in this universe, Dr. Manhattan retrieves the other characters from the Watchmen universe, as Ozymandias reveals that he had orchestrated this ending from the beginning so that Dr. Manhattan can go on to save their own world. The comedian shoots Ozymandias as revenge for killing him, but finds himself sent back to his own world by Lex Luthor, back to the point where he would die in Watchmen's original history. Reggie stops Ozymandias from bleeding, wanting him to pay for his crimes and rot in prison. Mime and Marionette are told they will see their son sometime in the future, as Dr. Manhattan returns to April 15th, 1984, and prevents the death of Carver Coleman. Back in the Watchmen universe, Reggie visits the grave of his friend Byron and thanks him. Ozymandias' own headquarters is turned into a prison, and outside a young girl named Cleopatra Pack watches the rise and fall of Ozymandias, and in the future would adopt his pet, and she would name herself Nostalgia. Mime and Marionette raise their second child, a girl named Anita Maeve, as Dr. Manhattan realizes what happened to their son, their first child. Manhattan himself was responsible for taking the child. teaching him everything he had learned as a child to now. And as the man once known as John Osterman gives the last of his powers to heal the Earth and give the remainder to the boy, the Watchmen universe is now at peace, with all nuclear weapons being erased. At the Hollis family household, the two parents talk about what John did and the aftermath of his actions. Outside, a young boy rings their doorbell, and the Hollis family's daughter, Sally, answers it. The boy explains that a friend of Sally's parents brought him here and would know what to do with him. As Sally invites him in to have pancakes, she asks his name. The boy, whose forehead possesses Dr. Manhattan's symbol, replies that John calls him Clark. Everything ends. Doomsday Clock number 12 is overall a great ending to just the series itself. Everything built up within it reaches its end as the conflicts that arose within it all face off against one another. And the most important thing that Jeff Johns brought up in the series is the importance of Superman, the one thing that caused the changes in the metaverse. But it was also the reason why Dr. Manhattan decided to fix what he changed. Despite noting his importance to the metaverse, Manhattan only saw Superman as a being that would end his life. But when he finally reaches that moment, he is instead saved by him and inspired by the Man of Steel to make a different choice. In my opinion, this was portrayed and written incredibly well. The highlights of this issue was definitely the return of the Justice Society of America and a proper return of the Legion of Superheroes. What was brought up in DC Rebirth and just hinted very early on has finally been returned as promised. The two teams of heroes returning to aid to help Superman is such an amazing scene. I couldn't help but just have a huge grin when I saw that page. It is just an amazing page to look at. John's provided a kind of a nice wrap up to Doomsday Clock, but also to Rebirth and to Watchmen, even if Alan Moore would hate it. But I do have a few gripes with this issue and its ending. The first one being the aftermath of what's happened in Doomsday Clock in the DC universe. So everything that was brought up in this, so like the Superman theory, the Moscow Massacre, what Black Adam was doing, all of that is just either ignored or just completely wrapped up. Like the whole Superman theory, it seems to just end because now the Justice Society of America is here and they're advocating against it. What Black Adam was doing, okay, where's the end result of that? And a lot of like the deconstruction of a few characters are also not addressed or properly reconstructed at the end, aka Martin Stein, one half of Firestorm, his whole, he wanted to make sure that Firestorm was created, manipulated events to get Ronnie to be the host of the Firestorm Matrix and all that, and believed to have been helped create other metahumans and all that. That is just brought up in one issue and then completely just ignored, apart from a passing text that just says that he's facing a prison or facing an inquiry. That's it. It's not, the deconstruction of that character is not reconstructed or addressed at all. The second problem I have is with Ozymandias revealing he orchestrated all of this, or at least the ending of Doomsday Clock. While he's known to have manipulated events before in Watchmen, it feels a bit corny and contrived, and considering the grand scale of what Dr. Manhattan did with the DC universe, I would think that would be too big or too complicated for someone like Ozymandias to manipulate or to control. My third one is something overall with Doomsday Clock and its approaches to Rebirth and all that. It kind of just ignores some decisions that Manhattan did. The main one being, why did he save Jor-El? Why did he save Superman's birth father? Because he saves him, and then Jor-El ends up on Earth, and no, he gets a twisted perception of humanity and then takes on the alias of Mr. Oz and does all of his own things, capturing several people, Doomsday, Prophecy, Mr. Mixelplix, Tim Drake, Titans Tomorrow, Tim Drake, and what was Manhattan's endgame there? Why was Jor-El so important that he had to prevent his death? He saved him from the destruction of Krypton. And it's not, unless I missed something in either this or the Oz effect or whatever, it's not brought up and it's not addressed, and we get no conclusion to that. Why Manhattan did that? Or Manhattan only changed the DC universe because he was curious. Why does the metaverse change because of one person? And that was it. And any other time someone tried to approach Dr. Manhattan, he killed them or just defeated them. As he did with Thorn in The Button, he burned half of his body off. And then earlier on in Doomsday Clock, when he's confronted on Mars, he defeats a huge conglomeration of superheroes and then leaves to go to Earth. Like, okay, what's like? They really just kind of ignored a lot of things just Manhattan did, and it's just never addressed. But apart from all of that, Doomsday Clock number 12 is a good to great issue. And for its story, rating-wise, I would give it a 4.5 out of 5. While it wasn't completely perfect, I did think it was a good end to the series, and it nicely wrapped up the basis of what Rebirth started. Dr. Manhattan changed the DC universe. We found out why, and then we got at least some kind of a resolution, conclusion to that, with him at least partially fixing what he did. For the art and coloring, I give it a 5 out of 5. Frank and Anderson's art and coloring are amazing in this issue. Everything looked incredible, especially the scenes of Superman fighting everyone and the return of the JSA and the Legion to help him. The best, in my opinion, the best 2 pages of the comic. And for the cover, I give it a 4 out of 5. Great art and good art and coloring, a very nice homage to Watchmen's iconic blood-stained smiley pin, but instead now being on Superman's symbol. I think overall with Doomsday Clock and Rebirth, I think it's such a shame that the rest of DC Comics have just ignored it because of the delays, and they have now started to contradict or change what Jeff Johns and the team set out to finalize in the series. And for Rebirth overall, in Doomsday Clock, Alfred is alive. Lex is no longer Apex Lex. The Legion of Superheroes returns, despite the fact Bendis brings them back in his own way and just ignores that. It's Bendis, ignore anything. But the current state of the DC Universe and Doomsday Clock contradict one another. But it seems like despite how much they've trampled on Rebirth and what's happening currently, Johns and the team set out to finish what they started the way they wanted it to. This seems to be always their end goal in mind for how they started Rebirth, and I'll give it to them. At least they didn't perfectly finish it, but at least they ended it in a good way. And something else that I'm going to bring up is that before I finish this review, and something else I'm going to bring up is Johns' future of DC Comics that he envisions in Doomsday Clock. How there's going to be more crises, a lot of changes to the timeline. There's also going to be another DC and Marvel spin-off. Not spin-off, crossover. All of that, and I've seen a few people talk about it and saying, "Oh, great! They're planning out DC's future. It's just going to be another whole lot of crossovers and events and all that." Do take in mind that DC has a tendency to just ignore or forget any planned future that Johns makes for either the universe or a character. For example, his Green Lantern run for the New 52, he planned out all these futures for all of the main characters. None of it happens. it's all just completely ignored or forgotten. And also, the prime example, Doomsday Clock. DC, just because of delays, they're just like, yeah, this whole, it's supposed to be set a year into the future. We're just going to forget that and just do our own thing now, because we can't just wait for this series to end and for have everything to catch up. We need to fill time. We have other stuff we have to do. So whether those the so-called potential futures will happen, I'll have to wait and see. But I think the odds are stacked against them. Like I said, DC has a tendency to just ignore or forget any future that John's plans for the universe or the characters. So that is it for my review. Thank you all for watching. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. Links are in the bio, or the actual handles are in the outro. Well, whatever, I don't care. Pick one. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Subscribe and or hit the notification bell if you're new to the channel or haven't already. I've been Chris, and I will see you next time.